which I've done to you guys a few times, because I follow him. So anyways, and he said to him, what is written in the law, how does it read to you? And he answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. We've talked about this, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered correctly, do this and you will live. But wishing to justify himself, he said to him, and who is my neighbor? So we'll get to part 2 in a second of the story. But share with me and everyone else some ways that we justify. How do we struggle with this idea of justifying when it comes to loving those that are in need? How do we not do this? We give money. Yeah. Busy, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, I think both of those are solid because the money feels good to us, like we've done something, and it is. We have done something, but I agree, my time is way more valuable than my money. Great. What else? Yeah, I don't want to put them in danger. We have somewhere to go. We got to get to the mall. I'm only thinking about my own. I got 2 kids, that's what I'm thinking. I'll come back with a story later on about that. God's just... the day he stops surprising me is the day I'll get worried. I just love how Jesus continually takes what I think I know about him and he just... You've heard it said, now I tell you. And I'm like, I like that about him, though. What else? What are some ways? Maybe one more we justify ourselves. Yeah, great. You're kind of just at a loss. And even looking at those stats, it's like, where do I even start? 1,000 girls on the street, where do I even begin here? I felt that for sure. Great. Someone's going to say something? Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I brought up the idea of Tony, the same one that wrote that quote, he invites 5 to 7 homeless people over his house all the time. All of us got uncomfortable, including me. So yeah, there's a sense of, I'll say for that, that God's really patient with us, all of us. And so a few years ago, I was going to do a whole thing on just hospitality, but we don't have time for that. But I will say that a few years ago, we felt like God was asking us to invite this couple to stay with us for 6 months for free, and we barely knew. I had one conversation with the guy beforehand. They lost their apartment. They needed a place to stay. We had a newborn at the time. So the fact that they wanted to be in a room next to a newborn is kind of incredible itself. But so we brought that up to our friends offhandedly, just other couple friends, and they were like blown away by this. For us, and I'm just saying that for us at that point, it wasn't that big a deal because it wasn't the first time God had asked us this little step of getting out of our comfort zone. And every time we took a step, he expanded a little bit more. And then he took another step and he expanded a little bit more, And sometimes I wonder if that's what the journey of following Jesus is you just, one day you wake up and you're way out here and you're like, you're right, this is crazy. This doesn't make sense. You're right. Sometimes it is a little unsafe. I think the riskiest place you'll ever be is the center of God's will. But I've seen this slow and patient and loving stretching in my life. I didn't set out to work for UGM. I wanted a nice office and books. I didn't expect to take 40% pay cut. I didn't start that way, so I guess what I'm saying. And it won't end that way either. So, great. Those are awesome. So let's go to the next part here and look at, that was, are we going to do that? Yeah, let's do this now. So we mentioned busyness is what keeps us from compassion, and we mentioned some other things. I want to come up with 2 really kind of practical ways also, I believe, that that keeps us from compassion. The first one is I've seen a tendency in my own life to trust a phrase. So when you're walking by someone that has a sign on the side of the road, you will make a decision to trust something. We mentioned this earlier. You will in that moment as you walk by. I will trust something. Some of us will trust the words written on their sign that need food, please help, whatever it is. And we actually think that that they're being honest. So I'm trusting, right? Others of us will trust a predetermined statement that we made in our lives. Like, I never give money to homeless people. But you're still trusting something. What I would love to challenge you with is to trust Jesus. Because the reason why I don't ask him, what do you think, as I walk by the homeless person, is because I'm scared to death what he's going to say. Because I know him well enough to know what he might say. I've seen examples in the stories of like what he says and what he just said. We read on. I mean, like that's why I don't ask him, what do you think, Lord? So I'm trying to start to ask him, what do you think? And sometimes it's Kyle, this meeting that you're in the middle of, that you're walking to, it's actually important. Just pray for that person. It's not like he's like chatting my ear off like a teenager with unlimited texting. It's just, but I don't hear God that way. But I do get an impression that he just says, just pray for him. Okay, great, I'll pray for that person. Other times, it's been God saying, yeah, actually, I want you to give some money to that person. I know what they're going to do with it. And it's really good, it will help. One time, I was going into Home Depot on a Saturday. How suburb is that? And so, and I'm with my family, and I noticed this girl on the corner with the sign, and I remember that stat at 45 minutes. And I feel like God's like, I need you to go talk with her. And I'm like, I got my kids. And he's, bring them with you. So Lincoln, Sawyer, and I like walk across traffic, and we're like, hold on, buddy. And we get to her and have a 15-minute conversation with me and my boys. Helped a ton because they're there, so now she doesn't think I want anything from her. She lowers her guard a little bit. I'm able to share with her. There's this thing called the Hope Line at UGM that it's a phone number that people can call, and since every situation, every person is unique in what they need, they really take more time, and they have way more resources, both in UGM and partnering organizations, to find out how can we best serve you, how can we best help you. And so that's why it's a phone conversation relationship as opposed to just handing out something that's a one size fits all, which isn't the case. And so she was like, yeah, I'll call them. And we had a great conversation. My boys prayed for her. Had an incredible conversation with my boys in the car later on that night. It was really good. My point is, I'm trying to trust him, and I'm scared to death to trust him. Another thing I think we trust instead of Jesus sometimes is that phrase, hate the sin, love the sinner. I'm not a fan of it. For starters, I think it's not biblical. I think if you want to be really accurate, it'd be love the sinner, hate your own sin. I think that's more correct. Imagine what it would look like, what my posture would be as I'm approaching the other, whatever I perceive as the other, with the same mentality that Paul the Apostle had when he said, I am the chief of sinners. Imagine what my posture would look like approaching that person, wherever that person is. Thinking like, I need a lot more help than you do. And it would humble me, it would change me, it would completely alter the conversation. I guarantee I'd ask more questions and answers, I'd listen better. I'd actually see them as a valuable image of God. There's the rant there for you. Another one is, I think we wage war. So, have you noticed in our culture lately that we are outrage obsessed? We are obsessed, look at your Facebook feed, we are obsessed with being outraged about something in culture. So, and the red cup, excellent, you're right. The red cup is the newest and latest. What other villains do we make? Shout about, what other villains do we create in culture? We got the red cup, the Satan sipper. What else? What else do we got? What other villains do we create? Yeah, Obama. Yeah. Yeah, Hillary is a villain. Obama, Trump. It depends. We just create these, yeah. Mm-hmm. What other villains do we create, guys? Yeah, people groups. Like what? Yeah. Vilify for sure. Absolutely. Other ones in the media. And the same things we vilify typically, sometimes will be in the other extreme, the heroes. Coach Kennedy, the guy that prayed at the game, could be a hero or a villain. Either way, we're outraged. Kim Davis is a great one. Gay rights, the school district. Planned Parenthood. So here's the deal. That's a lot, right? Everyone's like on edge right now. I'm not here to make stances on all those things. Here's my, you got to hear this, please, please, please. There will be another hero and there will be another villain in a month from now. I absolutely guarantee you. The reason why is because they never last. We have to create a new hero and a new villain every month or so because eventually this fizzle out, we lose our attention, we just don't care as much. One of them is defeated, whatever that is, because the article we read, they were just smited. But we have to create over and over again new heroes and new villains. We go from one outrage to the next, and it keeps us from actually loving and engaging people in need. My suggestion to you is, what do you think our battle is against? Does anyone know that passage? Battle is... Mm-hmm. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, but the powers and principalities of evil. So anytime you or I make a hero out of anyone else besides Jesus, I don't think it's the gospel anymore. And anytime I make a villain out of anyone except Satan, I don't think it's the gospel. I think there's one hero and there's one villain, and I know who wins. And so I'm secure, I'm not threatened, I'm actually really loved. And it frees me up to think more spiritually. We have to remember this is a spiritual thing that we're looking into. It's not just the tangible needs, it's not just social justice, we're not the YMCA, we are followers of Jesus, seeing the world in a spiritual way. And I think we have to take a step back and really see that, and see others like that too. All right, there's a good rant for you. Let's get into this last little thing here. Let's hop into the second part of that story. Do we have time for this? Yeah, we do. All right. Jesus replied and said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. So this is his answer. I love it. He tells a story instead of giving the answers. It just frustrates me sometimes. To Jericho, fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance, a priest was going down to the road, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side. Likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by the other side. But a Samaritan, who was on a journey, came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion, and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them, and he put him on his beast, and brought him to an inn and took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hand? And he said, probably didn't want to say it, but he goes, the one who showed mercy towards him. Then Jesus said to him, go and do the same. So who's the neighbor? That's the question the guy asked, and this is how Jesus answered. Who is my neighbor? Anyone you come in contact with? Okay, cool. Yeah, people. Great. He expands the horizon quite a bit. That tells me that it's not about proximity, it's about opportunity. Right? This is not about proximity, this is about opportunity. the passage. He saw an opportunity, he took the opportunity. Great. Who's the hero in this story? Samaritan. Were the listeners of the story, how would they have viewed the Samaritan? Yeah, the perceived other. Jesus says this all the time. He loves making heroes out of people we think are villains. He does. He's really good at it. And it ruffles our religious feathers, and he continually surprises me how he does this. But he's doing that on purpose in this passage. To get underneath, you think you heard it said this, but now I tell you this. He's really getting underneath the belly of what we think it looks like to love our neighbor. How did he address the physical need of the person? Shelter. Took care of the wounds. Great. Yep, money. How did he take care of the long-term needs of the person? So now we're talking immediate physical. What about systemic? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Excellent. Good job. So it's not just a pat yourself on the back. I actually see this as a longer-term investment, potentially, if the person wants, if they're willing. Yeah. I think, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the innkeeper, he was a great witness to the innkeeper.
How so?
Well, the innkeeper would certainly know he was a Samaritan, and he knew that the other guy was Jewish.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Breaking down boundaries.
They would have known that. They would have known that they could have that.
Crossing over these cultural lines that we create. Yeah.
I think it kind of stems back to the video of the homeless gentleman we watched earlier. It's like he wasn't a bum, he was a human. He wasn't a Samaritan, he wasn't a Jew, he was a human.
Yeah. Great. Good connection. Yeah. Another thing that pops out of me is the innkeeper. The Samaritan must have had some good credit, because the innkeeper was like, "Yeah, you'll be back," and he had money. I always I want to be in a place financially that if God says, "This is where I want you to go," that I don't have something keeping me in the way. How sad would that be for this good Samaritan to see this need and I don't have any extra? So there's a rant in there. I'm gonna keep going, but I really see that as it's real practical that this guy really thought through his finances, and he left margin in his life to be directed by God and be able to follow God wherever God was going. Something I want to share with you is I wrote the other day is I'll never care for the marginalized until I create margin in my own life. So busyness, right? Someone mentioned. If I'm not interruptible, I will never hear. If I'm not willing to be inconvenienced, I will never notice. Busyness is the enemy of compassion. And that's been my story quite a bit over the years. Questions, thoughts, concerns? What do you think before we move on? You can shout out. You don't have to wait for me to call on you. Just processing. All right, so we're talking, yeah.
I have a question about what you said about the tent people. And it just stuck in my mind. How many of these people are there by choice? And when we give or when I want to help someone, I want to know that the person is in need. And so you described this person who had been there for 9 years, and he was really smart and educated. Why would he be there?
It's great. We talked about that quite a bit. Because when he shared, and he shared with us for probably an hour, excellent, gracious man. He spoke with a lot of pride. Like, look what we've created. Isn't this great? Isn't this incredible? How many people we're able to bring in? And so there was no sense that he wanted to move out. He talked about how some of them have jobs and the frustration he has with many of the shelters that only take people in the evening and have to get in before a certain deadline. But most of the jobs available to people that just are homeless are night crew and graveyard shifts. And so that just, when are they going to sleep, right? And so Tent City offers this idea, you can come back anytime you want. We don't have a curfew. You can just show up and go to your tent. But he definitely phrased it in such a way that I don't plan on changing at all. Which rocked our world a little bit because we thought, well, don't you want to change? But, I mean, people have been living in tents for thousands of years. I mean, they did just fine. Some of them were really joyful and happy and God-fearers.
I can understand that. It's choice. But then why would I want to support someone like that? As opposed to supporting someone who is really in need. Maybe I've got a hard heart.
No, I think it's a good, valid question. What do you guys think? That's great. What do you think?
I agree with what he's saying. If that guy is happy, he's content, he's not really in need. His needs are being met for the most part. Somebody who truly is out of their element and they are starving and that's the person I think he's talking about. Like, you'd rather have his $10 go to that person or a night in a hotel versus someone who loves staying in the tent. And this is my life and I own it.
Yeah.
Who's in greater need? You're right.
I don't think everybody in that tent city, though, is what's the necessary.
Yeah, no.
So that person
Yeah, I think there's a distinction between being vulnerable and being in need. So when you talk about greater need, that's what you're getting at, right? Is I want to care for those who are really vulnerable, that can be taken advantage of and pressed and silenced and hurt, right? And then we have need. That's that I think all of us have need. I shared with you some of my needs, right? Some of the ways I medicate, some of the things that I want to suppress and bury down and that make me dysfunctional. And yeah, but so we all have need. I think there's greater vulnerability. And in the passage, I see both vulnerability and need. So, yeah, you first.
So that man that is educated and happy being in the city and doesn't want to change, I think the real question is he out panhandling or does he have a job? And so is he one of the ones asking for a handout so that we're supporting him to be in Kansas City?
Is he taking advantage, or is he actually? Yeah, I'd be surprised if he was out panhandling. It seemed like he has hands full just organizing everything. Frankly, he really saw it as like his job. Yeah.
Or is this his mission? Is this where God has placed him to be a spiritual life to the other folks in the Tent City, to be able to do organizational skills, to be able to make sure that resources are fairly shared, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Jesus told us to sell everything we have and follow him. So maybe he took that to heart.
Great thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like there's kind of a bigger question here of, is it more important to like serve and live sacrificially and give of yourself, or to manage where those resources end up going? You know what I mean? Like I don't necessarily know if like where's the greater calling, I guess is the question.
Yeah. Great. I've wondered that quite a bit in my own life.
We at this table, when we were a little older, we were a little more suspicious.
That's
And
okay.
I used to work with a girl whose sister would go to Seattle with her friends dressed as poor people and beg money for concert tickets. And I also know somebody, a story that I was a reliable person. Somebody worked in a bank, and the so-called homeless man would come in with his money that he collected on the road on a corner someplace, and he had over $50,000 in his account. Now we hear these stories, and so when we see people with the signs or the need is there, I mean, the red flags go up.
Yeah.
How do you discern?
And that's a reality. Absolutely.
I mean, so we're suspicious.
So how would you find out
How did I find out about that?
whether or not she's saving up money for a concert ticket?
How did I find out?
How would the average person find out?
They wouldn't,
Okay.
unless you knew her. I mean, she was dressed as a poor person going with her friends over to Seattle and panhandling.
How would you get to know her?
How would I get to know her?
How would the average person?
Probably by talking, but I don't think she was telling the truth. So anyway, the question is, if you want to give to people, is it better to give like to the Salvation Army or the Community Gospel Mission, or then you don't know, but you want to help.
Yeah.
How do you help?
So we talked about this over the break, and believe me, this is under construction for me. I don't have great answers to that. Again, I default to like I gotta trust Jesus, right? And frankly, like I think trusting Jesus means most likely I'll get taken advantage of sometimes. However, I think it's a real red flag when they don't want to connect to relationship. When they only want one of those two sides, but they don't want the middle. It's not like they're going to dump out their entire life story to me in the first 5 minutes we talk, but if I get this sense that you actually don't, you just want my money, I think that's a red flag. And yes, UGM will gladly take your money. Because I think there is some, I agree with you, I think there's some wisdom there that you should point to others, not just UGM, there's some great nonprofits out there that have those relationships and do know how to discern. I just think it's important for us to not only do that, because if we do, I think that we also, in some respect, have to have some kind of relationship with those in need in order to fully express and live out this gospel that God challenges us with. So, both and, I think there's a lot of wisdom there in giving to people that have those relationships and have the systems in place to be able to address the entire person. We talked about those two extremes. But on the brief 5-minute conversation I'm having with someone on the street with a sign, if they don't want to connect with me, I think that's a red flag from my end. You know? So, other questions or thoughts?
Just a comment, on your slides, you showed, at the bottom, basically the reasons for street, and one of them is mental illness, and a big portion of street people are
Yeah.
mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
They were put on the street because of court decisions and things.
Yeah.
They no longer can take them off the street and put them in institutions
Mm-hmm.
where they really need help.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people out there that really aren't able to.
And UGM has a ministry specifically towards those people. One of our interns last year, Rhapsody, did that. And the stories she'd come back with. She reminded me of the shepherd that left 99 to chase after one. She'd tell me the story like, I'm a little tired today. How come, Rhapsody? Because I walked 12 miles through Seattle in the pouring rain to connect with different people that I knew were like tucked away. And she's been trained to really ask great questions, walk with people with mental illness through those questions, not chastise them, but like just takes a lot of time to build that trust, for sure. One more question or thought? Those are great.
Well, just one other comment. A lot of people on the street, if they ask, how is this person on the street for 9 years? I remember guys that used to hang out in a church in San Diego years ago, and they'd sit around drinking wine and stuff all day, and yet when they were offered a job, the guy says, why would I want to work?
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to work?
Yeah, I agree.
There are people out there who just
Yeah, when we go out on search and rescue, again, it connects it to relationship. We build trust and relationship with these people. But we found that every once in a while, a window will open in someone's life where they really truly hit rock bottom. They're in desperate need. And they're like, I'm just done. I'm done with the addiction. I just need help. Could you help me? And so UGM just recently started a second van that's on call at all hours of night to, like, if we find someone like that we've built that trust and relationship, they know we're going to take them safe, we're not going to take advantage of them. All those things have been established, right? The touch has been there. But we have like low-hanging fruit, frankly, right? That we'll call this number and the person comes out in the van and they will pick the person up right then and there, because it's oftentimes if you don't grab them in that moment, the next day they'll default back to something harmful, and they get them right into the program. I mean, so we've seen that happen a few times, and it's just like, okay, good. Like, this is why we pass out sandwiches. This is why we do clam chowder. The problem is not that they're hungry. The problem is a relationship issue, right? And so it just takes time to get to that, though. And every once in a while you find one it is, you put them on your shoulders and you go home and celebrate, right? That's gospel right there. That's awesome. Yeah.
Can't force somebody to do something, they have to come to it on their own terms.
Yeah.
That's probably where they're gonna find the most progress, is when they really wanna help themselves.
Yeah. It takes time.
Some of it too is, a lot of times people may say that, they may say, I don't need it, I'm fine, I don't wanna do that, but it's a front.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that, they're on survival mode, they don't have hope, they're living day to day. So it's much easier to kind of close that off and just say, fine, why do I need it? I'm just
Yeah.
gonna sit here and drink because I had no hope or dignity and this is all I know. And I'm just living till tomorrow. It's very easy to kind of just say that.
Yeah.
Kind of stop the conversation and just, separate.
It's the knife under the pillow.
Right.
Being trauma informed means to ask harder questions.
A lot of that stems from being rejected. Unfortunately, we, in our fight, reject.
Yeah.
And so they put that.
And isolate.
on all of us. And that's what they tell you, but that's not what they feel inside.
Yeah. CJ.
I was gonna say,
Pastor CJ.
I just think that it's, for me, sometimes I struggle with feeling like I get taken advantage of, but then I realize that that's I don't want to look foolish. But that's what the gospel means to be foolish. If I even I try to trust in the statements, saying, well, if I give to this person who's taking advantage, then I'm not giving to somebody who needs it. But then that's putting trust in the finiteness of my blessing or my finances. I trust in a God that can take
Yeah.
scenario, it's much more different. I'm not saying I don't have it down at all. I'm not even close. But I just think that it's much more complex. And you
Yeah.
want an easy answer. I want an easy answer. I want you to come up there and tell me, no, just write your checks to UGM, and we'll take your money.
I'll say that you are.
That's an easy, brutal answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just think it's much more complex, and I have a fear of looking foolish, but that's the gospel.
Yeah, I wonder if I never give money to homeless people is potentially just as unhealthy as I always give money to homeless people. You end up at the same place potentially. Yeah. Hmm.
So, you know, it's in his hands, and when we give away what he's allowed us to care for, we trust him that he's gonna
Yeah.
take it where it needs to go, for whatever reason.
Preach. I agree. All right, let me rip through this gaps idea. This is, again, we're kind of zooming in, narrowing the focus. Now we're talking about our literal, physical, next door neighbor potentially, okay? But it extends way beyond that. We've all seen this where it's here's God and here's me, and I can't get to God on my own, right? And so there is a Savior, right? Praise the Lord. There's a Savior that comes in Jesus that pays a penalty for my sins so that I can now have access to God, that I am fully known and fully loved, and I can have this restored relationship with my Savior. But I think our culture has changed and shifted quite a bit, that we sometimes negate that there's another gap here, where this is God over here and this is me, that this is now mistrust and this is trust. And I think we have to validate this gap in our next door neighbor's life, in the person on the street, and in order to get to this gap, so that strangers become acquaintances, and then they become friends with God and with us. And so the question, I think, of facing a lot of Christians as they engage culture and they engage their community is, how do we address this gap? We know this gap, right, all too well, and praise the Lord for it, but we typically sometimes tend not to validate this gap. And so this actually changes things from not just the proclamation of the gospel, but the demonstration of the gospel as well. So I'm not just talking about God with my words, but I'm sharing Him with my life. I'm serving needs in people's lives to bridge this gap. I'm loving people tangibly, so that we can also talk about this. Another way to see it is that famous book that came out years ago. This is blatantly stolen from Paul Metzger. Is this idea that evidence that demands a verdict. We've seen this. It's about apologetics. It's about building up enough evidence to say that this is why you should believe in God and Jesus. Excellent book. Excellent. However, I think our culture has shifted, where that's important, but it has shifted from a verdict that demands evidence. So people aren't wondering if God exists. They're wondering if He matters. Is He making a difference in your life? So to fill this gap, I've tried a lot of things in my neighborhood. And the funnest one is I've been throwing a lot of block parties. IES? And that's just been super fun. At the last church I worked at, it was just great. We engaged, let me show you this. I don't have time for that. Don't worry about it. We engaged our neighbors, and we challenged our congregation to do the same. We created this like starter kit box that like people were like, okay, but we basically just kind of gave them some basic details and instructions on how to throw a great party in your neighborhood. And then we backed way off and said, it's your neighbors, you know how to do it best. So what that party looks like and when it is and where it is, that's up to you. It's your neighbors. And we saw 68 families in our congregation decide to host block parties that summer. That estimated about 40 people per party. I think it worked out to be like 3,000 neighbors reached. New relationships started, right, as they just had a great time grilling burgers and hanging out, talking, and watching their kids play and jump on the bouncy toys. And it was just this really great, fun thing. From that, in my neighborhood, I got to know our next door neighbors, David and Sonia, and I love them so much. And their kids became friends with our kids. It was like this open door policy where the kids are just in our house all the time, eating way too much of our sucky apple juices, you know those things, or apple sauces. We piled through a lot of Costco ones of those things. And then, but we just got more friends, and then that turned into impromptu dinners, and that turned into just late night conversations, and yeah, eventually that turned into a conversation about Jesus. And David calls me randomly because he has my number, because we have a really great relationship, and he knows he can interrupt me, right, over dinner. That's fine. I just really like you. And it turned into this great conversation about what Bible he should buy, and that turned into a conversation of what does it look like to follow Jesus, and watching them begin this journey of faith was just amazing to see. And they came from very diverse backgrounds, Wiccan and something else, and it was just really fun. One of our friends, the Greers, host this big Halloween party in their garage every year. They open up the garage and put these big pop-up tents outside and just have a lot of hot dogs and chili. And they this last Halloween, they had I want to say 80 people over their house. We're crammed into this 2-car, and we're it was just fun. And the kids were running around in costumes, and I'm like, and so they invited us. We're not in their neighborhood, but just to handle the load. I mean, there was just so many neighbors, It also helped it was pouring down rain that day, so it was just everyone kind of, let's go there, it's warm. But it was just fun to see how God's using them to, again, bridge this gap right here. Some other things is I've thrown Super Bowl parties. People will watch the Super Bowl. It's just a matter of where. Why not just turn on your TV, invite them into your home. I've seen so many other expressions of this. Thanksgiving dinners, progressive dinner parties, all these different kinds of things. And so I want to share with you that handout on your back of your page has 20 practical ways that you can love your neighbor. And it's everything from making the time at the bus stop count for you parents. We typically just look at our phone, but what if we just actually had conversations and got to know people? My favorite on that sheet is borrow something. It's genius. Because think about it. If you go over to borrow something from your neighbor, can I have some flour? Can I borrow your aerator? Whatever it is. Then now they feel like they could borrow something from you. Genius. Now next thing you know, both your garage doors are open, and you could just have conversation, and this relationship continues because they have to get their stuff back, so you have to have another conversation. And again, it's just this idea of the gap before the gap, right? Acknowledging this demonstration of the gospel along with the proclamation of the gospel. And it reminds me of this fun. Yeah, I'll do that. This comment from Tony Chris, again, my mentor, one of my mentors, and he takes this posture when encountering people. Again, it really revolves around these ideas that much of our evangelism and how we communicate God is seen as sharing a piece of chocolate cake. So when I come to you with this message about Jesus, I see it as, if I'm not careful, as a piece of chocolate cake. And I make a lot of assumptions about you. I assume you want it. I assume you're not lactose intolerant. I assume you like chocolate. I assume you want dessert after your meal. And I'm the one that owns the chocolate cake. I have it, and I'm being really charitable, and I'm sharing it with you. And I think that's difficult here. Another way of looking at it is sharing a sunset. This is where it gets really warm and fuzzy. But I don't own the sunset. I actually might know a lot of details about the sunset, how it reflects off the light particles, and I've understood the science behind it, the theology. And I've really looked into it and researched it, but that's not really the point of a sunset. The point of a sunset is really beautiful. So it's less about answers and more about adoration. And the two of us together get to observe this really beautiful thing. So it's no longer about charity, it's actually about community. It's no longer about what I possess and you don't. It's not this conversation, but it's this conversation. Have you noticed probably some of the very best conversations you've had have been side by side, not face to face, on a long road trip, on a hike, on those moments where you're just enjoying something together. It's less this and it's more that. I think that if we can change the way we approach our neighbors to look more like this, to get in situations where we're like this. So I don't just host a block party for them. Why don't you bring a dish from your personal ethnic background, and we'll celebrate that. And it's a potluck, and we do it together. Because it's not about, because if you didn't know, the first thing I learned is I tried to do it all on my own, and I recognized my neighbors felt awkward showing up empty-handed. I thought they wanted charity, what they really wanted is community. So it doesn't just go with the homeless person, it goes with your next door neighbor as well. How can we adjust that? I think I've seen a lot more fruit. Man, the conversation gets easier too. I feel like I have to have all the answers. And I'm more like, I don't know, what do you think? Let's figure it out together. Isn't that beautiful though? That's amazing. Yeah, this party we're hosting, it actually kind of reminds me of heaven. Isn't this great? And someday every tongue will confess and every eye will see, and we'll all have this incredible celebration of being loved and known and embraced by the God of the universe that did anything for us, including even die. Gosh, isn't this great? Isn't this reminds me of heaven? That could be the conversation. Right? Okay. A couple things. I know we're almost done, and I want to respect your time. Let me throw this up with a couple additional resources for you guys. That's a fun little quote from my buddy Tim Burke. Good works produce goodwill, which opens the door for the good news. It's catchy, right? That's a funny thing from Tony Kriz. I'm not the most important person in my own spiritual story. Why would I think I'm the most important person in someone else's story? So the sense that I feel like I always have to seal the deal. And I just think that I'm along for the journey when it comes to my next door neighbors. That's a picture of all those boxes we gave away for the block party. And then there's some additional resources on your back of your book, but I recommend if this resonated with you today, to dive into some of those. When Helping Hurts really talks about that patting yourself on the back for a job not well done. Art of Neighboring is excellent. That will focus more on your next door literal neighbor. Neighbors and Wise Men, Tony I've quoted a lot today, and I think his book's excellent. Let Justice Roll Down is really kind of like John Perkins is just the founder of all things justice. Gosh, it's a beautiful book from a beautiful man. Flesh by Hugh Halter would be kind of like the modern equivalent in a lot of ways. He's kind of edgy. I really like him. And The Hole in Our Gospel by Richard Stern. He's the president CEO of World Vision. And he talks about if you cut out every part of the Bible that had sense of loving your neighbor, caring for the oppressed, the quiet, the needy, that if you literally did that, cut it out in little squares, and what was left with is this book that barely held together. Similar way, that justice is not just like in addition to, it's part of this gospel that we get to share and be a part of and enjoy. And then one last thing I want to share with 5% battery left is, this is my shameless plug, I guess, too. I should probably do that. Sorry, guys. Hey, we're just going through all this stuff. There it is. Okay. So, kylecourt.com is my website where I write more questions than answers. I mean, you'll read that and be like, oh, that's what he talked about. So I write a lot about this kind of stuff, if that resonated with you. And then serveseattle.org is what I'm very proud to be a part of. So again, young adults. And another side benefit that I've loved about this, not only do they get to engage in urban issues and really express their faith, but they're thrown in this house. It feels like the real world. Thrown in this, we all live together on one. And they're from all over the country, different denominations, and you just throw them all in a house together, and conflict is inevitable. But so much of their lives, when they have conflict, they just defriend or not follow. And here, they can't go anywhere. We'll just lock the doors on them, but not really. But they have that conflict with their roommate, and then they have to work through it. And the character that comes from that, the experience, the maturity, I think we're making incredible husbands and wives, frankly. Because otherwise, they'll spend their whole time just running from things once they get offended. And they'll skip from church to church and eventually from marriage to marriage. And I think that, wow, we're creating something where it teaches them, give them the tools of the blessing on the other side of conflict. That's another just shameless plug, but I just really believe in what we're doing, and we're seeing lives changed. And not just for the year, but watching them, their internship turn into a full-time career. We're accredited now through Northwest University, so they'll get their degree as well. And anyway, so you can find out all the details there or just contact me. But I'm really proud of being a part of that. One more thing to share is I mentioned how Jesus asked more questions and gave answers. And I recognize that that's probably what this has felt like a lot. Today, that you're left with more questions than answers. I always think it's funny when Jesus sometimes told stories like people would leave so confused. You know, what did he mean by that? There's this one time he tells this parable. He doesn't even give like the answer, like this equals this. He's like, oh, all right. They're like hanging on the, maybe that's the point. So, speaking of Google, we mentioned earlier, many years ago, before Google, I'd be hanging out with my friends. And we'd sit around talking, and ultimately some topic would come up, right? About culture. Like, where was Ryan Reynolds born? And, and we would, like, talk about it and wonder and question. And we'd have this whole, like, debate. We'd choose sides. Out of that developed, like, inside jokes and laughter. And, like, sometimes it'd be, remember that? When, like, you'd build a whole night over impromptu-wise, like, this topic of conversation. And you think about it, like, a few months later. Like, remember when we spent 4 hours talking about where Ryan Reynolds was born? You know, like, you got mad, and then you came back, you're like, I'm sorry I got mad. And then, like, you know, do you remember that? Yeah, that was awesome. It was this memory maker, right? Now, we sit around in a room, we hang out. Where was Ryan Reynolds born? Someone takes out their phone, and in 5 seconds, he was born in Canada somewhere, Ontario, I think. No conversation, no questions, no debate, no inside jokes, no laughter, no memory maker. Like, we thought what we wanted was answers. I think what we want is wonder. That's part of the point of this, is that you talk about it on the car ride home today. I hope. I hope it keeps you up tonight talking to Jesus about it. Like, was he full of it, Jesus, or what do you think? That would be such a win. Because from that, all those questions, right, would spark like this great relational connecting between you and the person at your table, the person you're driving home with, and yes, the person of Jesus. Right? I think that's actually what he might want from us. I thought what I wanted from him was answers. I think now what he wants from me is wonder. And also notice your questions have changed a lot today. You can always tell about the kind of questions people ask by how connected they are to the issue or the person. They ask trivial questions, they don't really care. They start asking deeper, more, wow, you're really interested. Okay, well, let's go into this. And your questions have radically changed today. They've gotten deeper, they've gotten more dangerous, they've gotten more thought-provoking, they've gotten more profound. That's where I'm at too. Way more questions than answers, okay? So let me pray, and then we can stick around and talk more, but I want to respect your time. So Jesus, I got a lot of questions for you, and I'd like to spend the rest of this life asking you. I want to go through my day asking, what do you think about this person? And I had this thought, Jesus, what do you think about that? I want to listen for you. I want to be guided and moved by you. I want to be surprised by you of what I see in the scriptures. I want to be moved by you. I thought what I wanted was answers, and what I really want is wonder. I want to be in awe. Ultimately, what I want is to worship you. And that's where I'm at in this moment. Just want to worship you. The God who has all the answers, the God that's above all things, the God that someday will make this battleground into a playground. The God that notices every person, that sees all my inside and hidden ways, that loves so well. And I love you too. Thanks, Jesus, for this beautiful mess, this difficult road of following you. I wouldn't want it any other way. I just think you're awesome. In your son's name we pray. All God's people said, amen. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for your comments too. Those were great.
I was just thinking at the end when you said maybe it's just all about wonder, and I was thinking it's not only about the kind of the questioning wonder, like I wonder